Okay. The Interlopers by Saki. This is the story that we're going to read. Here's a little bit of foreshadowing for you. A little bit of a note on the author. So this author's name goes by Saki, but it was a pseudonym for Hector Monroe, and a pseudonym means like a pen name, AKA name, a nickname. And he died in 1916, a long time ago. He is a Scottish writer and journalist whose stories are about the social scenes. Okay, so I'm going to read this, but then I'll explain what it says. So the Scottish writer and journalist whose stories depict the Edwardian social scene with flippant wit and power of fantastic invention, and use both to satirize social presentation, unkindness, and stupidity, and to create an atmosphere of horror. Okay, what that means is this writer looked around and he saw a bunch of bougie people who were obsessed with their own intelligence and with their own powers of creation and all the inventions that was happening during this time. I mean, think about this. This period, how much progress happened and invention was occurring. And he looked around and he was like, these people think they're really smart. And actually, I'm going to show how dumb they are. And so he satirizes them. He makes fun of them. If you it's like SNL, but for olden days. Okay, think about it. Maybe a little bit like this. All right, we're still in the Pear Deck. If you are in the Pear Deck, you have a little star, and you get to drag this to whether or not you agree or disagree. So I'm going to give you this quote, and I want you to think about whether or not you agree or disagree with it. When you begin a journey of revenge, start by digging 2 graves, one for your enemy and one for yourself. And that is credited to Jodi Picoult. So do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? The idea is when you are starting on a journey of revenge, you have to be so into it that you are willing to die for that revenge. Do you agree with that statement or do you disagree? So take your little star and move it. I'll give people just another second to respond. Okay, let me reword it one more time. So if you agree with her, then it would be like you saying, when you seriously want to take revenge on someone and you want to bring them down, you are also prepared to die for that. Like you are so passionate about that hatred for that other person that you're willing to dig your own grave in order to take them down because you are just like, Argh! That's a feeling. Argh! Just so you know. Okay, let's see where we are. Oh, we've got a lot of agrees. Oh, man. That means, okay, wow. So some of you guys, you know what this tells me is that I should not make any of you super mad, right? That I don't want any of you guys to be my enemy, right? I personally would have to disagree. Just because I'm not super into revenge. I think it's a gut reaction to want to get revenge on someone, but I think there is something in letting it go and moving on. It's not easy, but it is literally better for your body. That there's been studies that show how anger and resentment and holding on to that actually if somebody disses you and you even think about that, it puts the same amount of cortisol coursing through your body as if the actual event. So not only was that one event traumatic, every time you think about it, you are causing your body to react in that same way. So And over time, like having too much cortisol and having too much like stress hormones in your body is damaging. So I disagree. There's a lot of you that agree. Could you tell me why? Maybe one of you? Is anybody willing to tell me why they would die to get revenge on someone? Okay. So maybe it depends on what you're getting revenge for. So you said that if somebody like kills your family, then you would be willing to go kill them and die in the process, possibly? Is that kind of what you mean though? Like if the thing that you're getting revenge for was so bad, then you would be willing to die for it? I think that's kind of a good point. That like I'm not gonna kill somebody for cutting me off in traffic. But if they hurt my daughter, if they, make it so something happens to my husband, they've made movies about this, right? When like Jennifer Garner goes like rogue and kills some people because they like kill all her family, right? Like they've made movies about this. It's an interesting thought. Thank you for that comment. Okay, let's get into interlopers. So, I'm going to give you the... Okay, so if you're looking in K-12, I want to show you where it is also, just so that you know. So in content, what I did is I've broken up the Unit 2, because Unit 2 is for short stories. So Unit 2 is broken up into Lamb to the Slaughter and Interlopers. So right now the only thing in Interlopers is the text, because that's all we're working with. Oh, for Pete's sake. I copied and pasted it. Here we go. I do want to read it out loud. So here's where I'm going to ask you to participate one more time as we're going through this. But if you're someone who like just really struggles to read when people are talking, I hear you and I understand. So maybe like turn my volume down. Okay. So he a little note about him one more time is that he's really into dark wit and deep insight into human nature. So I've actually given you a couple hints. I foreshadowed a little bit about what's going to happen in this text. I've told you, you saw a picture that went along with interlopers. So what we want to do is, as we're reading, we're trying to figure out who are the characters, when and where is this happening, and what type of conflict are we seeing. Okay, so that's a lot to go through, but I'll walk you through it. Here we go. In a forest of mixed growth somewhere in the eastern spurs of the Carpathians, a man stood one winter night watching and listening as though he waited for some beast of the woods to come within the range of his vision, and later of his rifle. But the game, for whose presence he kept so keen an outlook, was none that figured in the sportsman's calendar as lawful and proper for the chase. Ulrich von Gradwitz patrolled the dark forest in quest of a human enemy. Okay, so that's a lot to just throw out in one paragraph. So the Carpathian Mountains is where we're at right now. You can copy and paste that into Google, figure out where that is. And he's hunting. He's got a gun on him. And he's hunting for game. Game is not like Monopoly. Game is the animals that are commonly hunted. But it tells us that he's looking for a human. Paragraph 2. Okay. The forest lands of Gradwitz were a wide extent and well stocked with game. The narrow strip of precipitous woodland that lay on the outskirts was not remarkable for the game it harbored, or the shooting it afforded, but it was but it was the most jealously guarded of all its owners' territorial possessions. A famous lawsuit in the days of his grandfather had wrestled it from the illegal possession of a neighboring family of petty landowners. The dispossessed party had never acquiesced in the judgment of the courts, and a long series of poaching affrays and similar scandals had embittered the relationships between the families for 3 generations. Okay, so we have some backstory here. The backstory is this guy is on his land hunting humans, but the humans he's hunting, it seems like, have to do with this battle that's been going on since his grandfather. So his grandfather went to court and took these people to court who had been using his land illegally. But that didn't stop them. They've still been hunting on each other's lands illegally for 3 generations. The neighbor feud had grown into a personal one since Ulrich had become to be the head of his family. If there was a man in the world whom he detested and wished ill to, it was George, oh golly, I always struggle with this, George Zinum. We'll say that. Zinum, the inheritor of the quarrel and the tireless game snatcher, and raider of the disputed border forest. The feud might perhaps have died down, or been compromised if the personal ill will of the 2 men had not stood in the way. As boys, they had thirsted for one another's blood. As men, each prayed that misfortune might fall on the other. And this wind-scourged winter night, Ulrich had banded together his foresters to keep watch in the dark forest, not in quest of 4-footed quarry, but to keep a lookout for the prowling thieves whom he suspected of being afoot from across the land boundary. The roebuck, which usually kept in the sheltered hollows during the storm wind, were running like driven things tonight, and there was movement and unrest among the creatures that were wont to sleep through the dark hours. Assuredly, there was a disturbing element in the forest, and Ulrich could guess the quarter from whence it came. Okay. This is chock full of little hints of what's happening. So, Ulrich is our character. He got all of his dudes to get their guns and to go out patrolling in the forest because he thinks George is out there, and he hates him. And he wants to kill him. And that is the intent for going out in the woods tonight. But it's a pretty creepy woods. There's storm winds. The animals seem to be extra fidgety and like noisy. So we have some hints. And you could be thinking in your brain, what do you think is going to happen? Okay, so he's hunting. Why is he hunting? Because he thinks that the neighbors are illegally hunting on his land, so he wants to kill them. Oopsies. Hunting accident. Okay, paragraph 3. He strayed away by himself from the watchers, whom he had placed in ambush on the crest of the hill, and wandered far down the steep slopes amid the wild tangle of undergrowth, peering through the tree trunks and listening through the whistling and skirtling of the wind and the restless beating of the branches for sight and sound of the marauders. If only on this wild night, in this dark, lone spot, he might come across George Zinum, man to man, with none to witness. That was the wish that was upmost in his thoughts. And as he stepped around the trunk of a huge beech, he came face to face with the man he sought. Okay, so what do we see so far right now? What types of conflict do we see right now? So what are the types of conflict that we're seeing? Okay, so we see the 2 hunters. We've got man versus man. They're also in the woods in a storm. So that means that we've got some man versus nature. Thank you. Nature. Beautiful. Okay. We're going to read the next paragraph. It's a doozy. And I think we're going to end pretty quickly after this paragraph, okay? So the end is in sight. Stay with me. So as he stepped around the trunk of a huge beech, he came face to face with the man he sought. The two enemies stood glaring at one another for a long, silent moment. Each had a rifle in his hand. Each had hate in his heart and murder upmost in his mind. The chance had come to give full play to the passions of a lifetime. But a man who has been brought up under the code of restraining civilization cannot easily nerve himself to shoot down his neighbor in cold blood without a word spoken, except for an offerance against his hearth and honor. Okay. Now this is where the third one is starting to come in. They see each other. They both want to kill each other. But they're like, but I'm a civilized human being. I can't just shoot you without you, like, insulting me first. You know, it's like when you see someone and you're like, ooh, I want to lash out on them. Ooh, say something. Just say something. That's what they're both thinking right now. Like, say something so that I have justification to kill you. So that my code of honor can still be maintained. And before the moment of hesitation had given way to action, a deed of nature's own violence overwhelmed them both. A fierce shriek of the storm had been answered by a splitting crash over their heads, and meaning before they could leap aside, a mass of falling beech tree had thundered down upon them. Ulrich von Gradwitz found himself stretched on the ground, one arm numb beneath him, and the other held almost as helplessly in a tight tangle of forked branches, while both legs were pinned beneath the fallen mass. His heavy shooting boots had saved his feet from being crushed to pieces. But if his fractures were not as serious as they might have been, at least it was evident that he could not move from his present position till someone came to release him. The descending twig had slashed the skin of his face, and he had to wink away some drops of blood from his eyelashes before he could take in a general view of the disaster. At his side, so near that under ordinary circumstances he could almost have touched him, lay George Zynem, alive and struggling, but obviously as helplessly pinioned down as himself. All around them lay a thick-strewn wreckage of splintered branches and broken twigs. So this is where I want you to go back to the presentation slide. Go back to the pear deck. Can you draw what happened in this paragraph? So draw for me this scene in this paragraph. This is a dense, meaty, chunky paragraph. I want you to draw what happened in the second half of this paragraph. What do we see is occurring? Maybe you can type a summary of it. That's fine if you're like, bruh, I don't draw. Frankly, I think it's beautiful and funny and heartwarming that we can all laugh at ourselves, because anytime you draw something on the computer, it looks like a little kid did it. So I'm going to release you from, that shame of your lack of artistic skills. So go to the pear deck. Can you draw what happened in this paragraph? What happened in paragraph 4? Okay, anybody drawing? I would love to see what you're drawing. Yay! Yes! Okay, I can totally tell what's happening right now. I love this. Okay, we've got a red spot. Yes. That's what I like about Pear Deck is you can change your thickness and colors. Great use of color here. I feel like this is promising. Okay, so what has happened? It says that nature's own violence overwhelmed them both. A fierce shriek of the storm had been answered by a splittering crash over their heads, and before they could leap aside, a mass of falling beech tree had thundered down on them. So I'm seeing that here. I'm seeing that a tree has fallen on both of them. Oh, and you're adding to the woods. So lovely. So lovely. Okay, and we've got the arrow. Is that like an arrow going down? Yes. I'm getting a kick out of this. I hope you are. So this is what's called a summarization technique or a visualization technique. So this is a meaty text. It's got some big words in it, and the phrasing is a little old school and formal. So I wanted to know, like, can you visualize what's happening here? Because this is really crucial to the rest of the story. So they're both out. They see each other. They're like, oh, I hate you. Say something so I can shoot you. And then a tree falls down, and they're now they're trapped under the tree. And they're trapped pretty close. He said he's like just out of reach. So that ordinary circumstances, he could have touched him. And they're both alive and struggling. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and I want to leave us here. I want to leave us at paragraph 4, struggling. Wednesday, what I would love you to do is if you could read through this. We're going to also finish it on Friday, but it could be a really good use of your time to reread it on Wednesday. I might be able to find like an audio version or something like that too. Okay, any more beautiful drawings? All right, so where we're going to end it today is we're ending it on paragraph 4. That's a meaty paragraph. We have set the stage, and now we are like in the rising action part of our story.